get absorbed in, and you are Sonic.
What's up, everybody? I'm Taylor Olmstead, and I want to welcome you back to No Repeat, a podcast where we pick 3 songs every week with no repeats and no do-overs to create a perfect playlist for every occasion life throws at you. Joining me are my co-host, Tyler Reed. Squad?
Don't mind me just recording a guitar solo.
And Sean Evans.
He did his solo like so good justice. I was gonna try it, but now I think that's really good. And I don't want to take away from that beauty that was just laid on us. So,
Hey guys, I'm Jim Guitar Solo. Just got done working out.
Well, if you haven't figured it out by now, this week's challenge is pick your favorite guitar solo. Tyler, who sent this in?
This week, best friend podcast pal Ivan, you know you love him, challenges to find the perfect guitar solo. Our perfect guitar solo? Songs with soloing guitars. 1 or more solos. Discuss.
This was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Mostly because there are a lot of really great guitar solos. So my initial approach was, well, I'm going to make a list of all my favorite guitar players, and then I'm going to go through and pick some of their best solos. And I started doing that, and I realized 2 things right off the bat. The first is that a lot of my favorite guitar players don't really do solos. They do riffs, right? Like Dan Auerbach from the Black Keys doesn't really do guitar solos. He just writes really good riffs. Or Matt Bellamy from Muse. He has solos, but he's primarily a riff guitar player. And so then I had to eliminate a bunch of songs, but I was still left with a bunch of really excellent guitar solos, and some of them in songs that were really long. And so I almost broke the 5-minute rule this week, where we try not to pick songs longer than 5 minutes, because, there are so many great, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, The Who, even some White Stripes songs that are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes long because they just have really big guitar solos. And so I ended up having to constrain myself. I said, what's the best, most interesting guitar solo in a song less than 5 minutes that's still a song and not just a guitar solo by itself? Because Eruption by Van Halen is basically just a 1.5-minute long guitar solo. It's not really a song. And so I was trying to balance those 2 things, and I feel like that's kind of where I ended up with my pick, as a song that has a really great guitar solo in it, but it's still a coherent song on its own. And as far as
what a methodical process.
I feel like I had to be, because there were just so many good ones. And I narrowed it down to a couple of guitar players that I really liked. So my choices were The Edge, Jimmy Page, Jack White, George Harrison, and David Gilmour. And then I just listened to a ton of their music all week long. I was really digging back through my classic rock annals this week. Listened to lots of Zeppelin, lots of Pink Floyd, good bit of Beatles stuff. And just really going back to the guitar heavy music of my adolescence. And that's how I ended up with my pick, which, spoiler alert, is a U2 song.
I feel like for this challenge, I just kind of Kool-Aid Man through the wall at the last possible second. I was like, here's my song, I hope it's good. Because, just to be clear, I don't actually like guitar solos that much. I think they're really unnecessary. Obviously, I appreciate people's skill, but, I just don't think that they're a necessary part of anything. And so it's I'm gonna try to find a dance song that has a good guitar part in it. And I just kind of gave up on that, and I just looked up a bunch of lists of guitar solos, and I was I listened to the song, and then I forgot to listen for the guitar solo, and then I was well, I've got to listen to the song again. And then I just continuously just kept forgetting to listen to it to see if I actually enjoyed the solo. So it was just kind of all week. And of course there's the times of the week where I have 2 gin and tonics and I get sad late at night and I listen to Mitski. So aside from that, So I think really just kind of at the end of the day, I just kind of flipped to a band I hadn't listened to in a while, and I was do they play guitar solos? And they were on the list for one of the best ones. I was okay. And I was this is seems good enough. So it was really just kind of I don't seems good. I guess I wanted to avoid like a metal kind of sound. Like I was like, I don't know if I really want to do like a big long metal song. Like someone suggested Coheed and Cambria. I was like, that was kind of close. It's like, I'm not gonna, I don't know. It just didn't feel like the energy I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately why I skipped Led Zeppelin. Was the solos are great, but they're just so long. And I wanted something a little bit shorter. Because I feel that there is an art to the long guitar solo, but those aren't my favorite guitar solos, you know?
And I mean, of course, we can't play Stairway to Heaven yet. You know, we just can't do it. It's too early.
Yeah, I saw that Stairway to Heaven was Guitar World's #1 guitar solo of all time this week.
Ugh.
And I was like, really? Really? Like, yes, it's a great solo, but surely there's something else that could be the #1 of all time.
Now, something I did have a problem with was I was trying to find songs that, like, on my short list, I had a Baroness song. But, like, it felt like almost the entire song was sort of, like, one continual, like, solo. And you're like, at that point, is it really a solo? Like, if it's intentionally played, like, this is exactly how a song is going to be played every single time. And it's, like, there's not, like, a traditional, like, song structure. Is that really, like, a solo?
I felt the same way about Catch Hell Blues by the White Stripes. It's like there's long portions of that song where it's just Jack playing guitar. And I didn't, like, it's hard to tell where the solo ends in that song, which is ultimately why I didn't pick it, because it felt like this is a guitar blues song and not a guitar solo song.
Yeah, I had a lot of problems with that as well. Sean, what'd you do?
I agree with both of you. I didn't necessarily go back with what Taylor did and look for old school classic guitar solos. I wanted to look for something that was a little bit more modern, because I feel like I've heard a lot lately that, like, guitar is dead and rock and roll is dying, or if it's not already dead. And I don't necessarily think that's true, but I also feel like it's not at its most top point, right? Like, it's not, we're definitely not in the time of grunge when everyone's listening to this and that's going on. So my actual pick is like an EDM song that has a guitar solo in it by a famous guitar player from the 80s, when guitar solos were probably at their peak of prominence. I think maybe even in the 60s and 70s they were, but I mean, I feel like the 80s was just littered with guitar virtuosos that were just running up and down the fretboard and had this classic sound and doing all this stuff. And they didn't really have, it was before effects had really come in, so it was more amp-driven tones. And I don't have a problem with any of that, the effects or anything. I think the reason that I picked this one was because when I first heard this album and this song, it just really struck a chord with me, not to have a play on words there. But it was just like, it was really good. I found myself moving more away from acoustic guitar and into electric guitar because it really inspired me that much. And I don't really I want to save it for my actual song, but I like what both of you did because I think you both had awesome picks.
I think we did a little reversal, Sean and I. I think we really just kind of picked. Well, maybe not my song, but I feel like we definitely kind of picked each other's bucket this time around, which I think is interesting because I kind of just wish I had picked Sean's song, but I forgot about that album.
And to be fair, Sean shot straight from the hip and picked this song almost immediately when the challenge was put down. So
he knew what he wanted.
I thought about other songs in the week, knowing that I could change my pick, but as we'll go into later on, I felt like this was the one.
Well, why don't we just go into it now? Let's do your pick first.
So this week I chose M83's Go, featuring a guitar solo by Steve Vai.
I'm coming for you.
The first time that I heard this song, I was working for a retailer at the time. And I think we talked about it on the podcast right about the same time. Dude's Brunch. We talked about this whole album. We did an album review of this. And I don't know if I said this was my favorite song or if I said I didn't like this album in general because it was very EDM and not guitar driven. But when I heard this song over loudspeakers, I was taken by surprise at how amazing it is. Particularly the guitar solo at the end, because it's just so like juxtaposed to the EDM beats And you hear the guitar throughout the song, but it's not the same way the guitar, like the guitar solo is, because it's just so like driven and it stands alone by itself so much. But the more after I picked the song and I was researching about it a little bit more, I didn't know that it was Steve Vai that actually played it. I just figured it was some studio guitar virtuoso who was pretty good. And I actually didn't know, and this is interesting, that the one solo is actually made up of 2 recordings submitted by Steve Vai, and like cut together to make this one solo at the end. I don't know, I thought that was kind of interesting. Even though when I watched the live performance of M83 playing Go, they had like a studio guitarist that got pretty close to nailing it. It wasn't exactly right, but it was also for Jules Verne, so it wasn't like you were going to get an entire 4 minutes long to play a whole song from start to finish.
It's okay, Sean. I said I didn't like Art Angels. That album was really good. How unfortunate that Grimes has a tumultuous history now.
We all come out with unpopular opinions sometimes. No, I think this is a great pick, though. It is kind of a surprising guitar solo, right? Like, when you think of M83, you think of kind of synth pop and like a little bit of an 80s vibe, but not really the hair metal 80s, which is what this solo is giving me. Like, there's lots of hammer-ons and string bending, and it just feels like the sort of solo you would hear almost on like a Metallica song or something. Like, it's not a kind of...
Well, let's take it easy, Taylor.
I mean, it's not a kind of guitar playing that you would associate with synth rock, right? But I think that's what makes...
That's okay, all right.
I think that's what makes it work. And the particular tone that Steve Vai has is just unmistakable on this song. Like, it feels so perfect, and I feel like any other guitar player can't and wouldn't do it justice. It's definitely the sort of thing that's like made in the studio and then almost impossible to reproduce ever again, which is a particular kind of solo, you know? I feel that way about some like Omar Rodriguez Lopez solos from the Mars Volta and At the Drive-In, right? Like these incredibly technical solos that, you know, you can try to reproduce them live, but a lot of times there's like triple tracked guitars and like crazy stuff going on that it makes it into this different animal. And I think that's what I like about this solo is like, this is clearly somebody at the peak of their performing abilities doing something that's like right at the edge of humanly playable. Like no kid is going to pick up a guitar and learn to play this solo right off the bat. And I think that's what makes it so interesting and so cool. It's like, yeah, he's trying real hard and like you can feel that in the song.
I think what's kind of interesting about it is that Taylor said there's no way that this setup would happen, but I feel like, kind of like referring back to last week, and a lot of like the kind of the underground like electronic stuff, people that are like experimenting with sampling, I feel like people would just like probably whole cloth rip like really good guitar solos and throw them into like not a city pop, like a like a dance track, kind of like this song. So, well, I think what makes this so good is that it's an original piece, and they got a very good person to do it instead of like just ripping someone's like literal audio from like an older song and just using it again. And of course, so that means that it's gonna feel better, it's gonna sound better, it's gonna feel more organic, it's gonna feel more natural, and that's what I think was so good about the song is that I think everything feels very harmonious, and it doesn't really feel that off. But like Taylor said, the guitar solo feels kind of like out of place for the genre, but it to me feels so organic to have those two things together because I think it was so intentionally crafted. So that being said, I think it's really good. I mean, I'm not like, I love the guitar, but I'm not like dying for the guitar solo. But I mean, obviously it's a good guitar solo, right? So it's a good song, good guitar solo. Is it the best guitar solo? I don't know. It's Sean's best guitar solo.
I appreciate that. I think we should go into yours next because it's a good gateway between my like amp-driven guitar solo into a slightly affected guitar solo, and then into Taylor's because it's like very affected. Which
compromised.
No, that's definitely not what it is.
My song is Guerrilla Radio by Rage Against the Machine. I heard Killing the Name of on Guitar Hero 2 when I was a very young boy. I then went out and bought the CD. Little did I know that the machine was referring to the government. I put the CD in with my mother and a friend, and I immediately realized, oh no, this is a band I probably should be listening to as like a 13-year-old. 14, 15? I don't know. I forget when Guitar Hero 2 came out. But anyway, so I rediscovered them this week, and I just got bitten by the Rage Against the Machine bug. I was like, this is the best band I've ever heard in my life. I just love the guitar riffs. They're so iconic, so classic, so memorable. But of course, we're talking about the guitar solos. I honestly hadn't even considered the guitar solos until I read a bunch of articles. And they were like, this is one of the best guitar solos. It was Bulls on Parade. I was like, okay, but I don't specifically like the chorus of that song very much. So I was like, let's keep on going. And so I found Guerrilla Radio as one of the songs. And I think even after I slapped it in, I was like, it's a guitar solo, but I just like the song in general. And then Sean showed off how they made that, and I was like, oh, this is actually sick.
It is.
This guitar solo, yeah, this is sick. And so I watched a small interview of Tom talking about kind of his setup. And one of the things I think that really resonated with me, that I think is deep within my soul, is that he said, you get paid, you go out and you buy a bunch of stuff, a bunch of guitar stuff. And it's you take it home and you put everything on full blast. It's you really try to go to the full end of the spectrum. And then kind of over time, you kind of tone it down, and you kind of measure it, and you kind of create the appropriate level of volume or dynamics with all the stuff that you just bought. And he was like, I just keep it at the full max, and I just make it work. And I was like, yes, that's me. That is my life. I'm like, I don't want to do this properly. I want to do what's fun and most exciting for me. So that being said, this guitar solo isn't very long, but it's buck wild. So I'll just go ahead and let Sean talk about it now.
No, I thought that's why this guitar solo is really good, because in the video, I hope we can put it in the links, but he talks about how when he recreates, I don't know who the YouTuber is. I don't think it's Tom. I'm pretty sure it's not. When he recreates the solo, he basically uses a Digitech Whammy, which is a pretty famous pedal, and a Crybaby Wah, which are also another very famous pedal that a lot of guitar players use. But he actually, where most of it is the tremolo effect that he gets is not from the amp or from a pedal. It's just from having one pickup at blast and the other one at 0, and then he kind of just, how do I say it? He just hits the strings with his fingers to produce the sound, and then he just toggles the switch up and down in between the pickups, so you get this tremolo effect, which is really cool, because when I heard it, I was not that impressed. But then when I watched this, I was very impressed, because you're right, it's like you were saying that his philosophy is 100% all the time. If you weren't going 100% all the time, you couldn't produce that tone, you couldn't produce that energy, that if you're the guitar player for Rage Against the Machine, you need to have that. And I feel too, I think Tom actually has a master class, or whatever it is, on YouTube that you can pay to watch. And it gives more about how he uses his equipment, and what his playing style is, and how his tone works. I'm pretty sure too, he probably has a rig rundown from some place at some point.
Oh yeah, he has a masterclass for sure.
Does he? Okay. But now I want to watch this rig rundown.
Are you really surprised?
I feel like Rage Against the Machine is one of those bands that people write off for various reasons. Some people write them off because they're too political. Some people write them off because they're too angry. Some people write them off because they don't like Zach De La Rocha's vocals. And all of those are decent reasons to not listen to Rage, I guess. But I never hear anybody talk smack about Tom Morello's guitar playing. I think he's generally accepted to be one of the weirdest, most inventive guitar players, at least of the last 20 or 30 years. And Tyler's absolutely right. There are no quiet Tom Morello parts. Everything is loud all the time, which is not, I can't sit through a whole Rage album like I could when I was 13 or 14. But whenever a song comes on now, I'm always drawn to just the pure energy of it. And I think Guerrilla Radio is one of the best songs for that. The thing I really like about this solo in particular, like Tyler said, is it's not very long, but it's iconic. When you listen to it, you kind of think, how is he making that sound? It's just such a weird noise. It's almost like a squeal. And I think that's what I'm looking for a lot of the times in guitar solos, which you'll hear when we get to my pick, is like, I want to hear people make sounds out of a guitar that I'm like, I don't even know how you're doing that. And I like that it's just kind of short and matter of fact here. Like, it's not show offy. It's like, I found this cool noise. Here's a couple bars of it. And now we're back to this super good riff and Zach De La Rocha yelling about the system again. Like, it's so no nonsense. It's very like Minutemen jam econo type of style. Like, get in, play loud, get out. And I love it. This is an awesome pick.
Yeah, and in that same video I was talking about, he also said that like his specific influence is like, how could I make this sound like a DJ, like scratching effects? Like, he was like, wasn't even looking at guitarists anymore. I'm looking at like DJs and how they're making those sounds, and like going after like certain like groups sound for that. I was like, that's good. It makes a lot of sense when you're trying to like make like a I don't know, because I feel like that's the interesting part, is that he's not necessarily playing it like a guitar. Almost, he's almost like doing like scratching like a turntables, right?
Yeah, it's like a weird mix of like percussion and electronics and guitar playing all at once.
It's like Sean Bean, a drumming guitar player.
I was just watching a little bit of an interview where he said he wanted to make his guitar sound more like somebody was scratching a turntable. Totally able to pull that off. And it's awesome.
What a great solo.
I'm going to have to go back and give Rage Against the Machine guitar solos some more listen.
I mean, I think everybody should revisit Rage Against the Machine in these troubled times.
What a perfect time to listen to Rage Against the Machine. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I was right all along.
13-year-old Tyler was raging against the machine before he even knew what it was about.
Right.
Well, speaking of songs about being angry at the government, I suppose we can talk about my pick now. This week I chose Bullet the Blue Sky by U2. I may have mentioned it when we picked this challenge, but I've always really loved The Edge as a guitar player. Kind of like Tom Morello, he's very interested in like making sounds with guitars that don't sound like a guitar. He's pretty well known for having just like an insane amount of effects pedals in his rig and like playing chords in ways that no one else plays them to get like specific tones to ring out of them. Like, he's kind of a guitar wizard. And I feel like Bullet the Blue Sky is one of the best examples of that, where you have a song built around a blues riff, but he's got so much echo and so much processing on it that it sounds otherworldly at points. Like, it's almost like ambient metal noise as opposed to a guitar. And so by the time you get to the guitar solo, like, there's just so much echo and so much space around each note that it really feels like he's in the middle of a warehouse, just like playing by himself with like the sound reverberating off all the walls. It's so big and loud and almost overwhelming at points, even though he's really just doing kind of a simple like sliding blues solo, which I think is what I like about it. Like, he's taken something simple and made it into something complex. I also like that this solo gives him room to improvise. If you go and watch live videos, he almost never plays it the same way. And that's something that I really like in a guitar solo too, is when it has some space around it that you can kind of play in.
I think if there's one thing that the Edge has mastered for so many people is the use of the delay, because like that's how he gets that reverb and that echoey effect and I feel like that's very prevalent throughout all of U2's music, is not only his use of effects but his use of delay and how he can make guitars sound like they're spaceships. Like, for lack of a better tonal context than that, you know? And that's what makes the Edge so awesome, because I remember in my younger days, I thought that the Edge was kind of a hack, that he like couldn't make guitar tone like Jack White, you know, like Jimmy Page. He just couldn't do it. And now that I'm into effects, now that I'm more of a guitar player, not a drummer. I realize that that is absolutely awesome, and that half the fun is coming up with a tonal concept that's not amp driven. So awesome pick and awesome choice.
I think that's a good point in that the Edge is kind of like a nuanced preference, because I feel like when you're a kid, you really gravitate towards virtuosity or like the best, like some sort of like some level of like objective skill, right? You're gonna be like, oh well, Dragon Force is the best band, obviously, because they play fast in a lot of notes. You're like, okay, well, I mean, I guess that could be true. But it's like, once you kind of accept that other things can be good, it's like, what if video games weren't all photorealistic? Like, what if we weren't striving for this realism? What if we made something cartoony that was fun and vibrant and colorful? What if we, instead of doing one thing, we kind of went the other way? And I feel like The Edge is a great example of an artist that you're not going to appreciate or understand unless you really kind of like look into it and really kind of like figure out what he's doing. I mean, and to be fair, I don't know what he's doing. So it's as we noted, my song pick was a guy that literally slaps his guitar around and makes it to sound like a turntable. But I think I have a lot of respect for what he does, and I think it would be more interesting to learn kind of like how he does things. Like, because I know after we got done recording the last episode, I forget, someone showed off kind of like what what the Edge's setup looks like. And I was like, this seems like a lot of work. This seems like way too much for me, and more than I would ever be able to to want to learn how to do with a guitar. But you know what? That's that's fine. It's okay that if it's not like specifically for me, but I have to at least like understand that his desire for specific tones and for specificity, I think, is really needs to be like noted. So like I've listened to this song a few times, and I'm just like, I don't know if I get it, right? Like, I think you can say, oh, well, this guy is playing like an 80s guitar player in like a synth retro style. You're like, okay, I understand that. You're like, oh, this guy is banging around on a guitar, making funny sounds. You're like, okay. But like the Edge is like, I am creating a soundscape with like a single guitar, basically live. He's be able to do so many things that most people would probably go into into like a program and just build it out. Like doubling up guitars or pressing stuff or moving stuff around. I don't know anything about guitar technical stuff or how the recording process works, but I feel like if I understand what I think the Edge's process is that he is able to recreate such dynamic sounds all by having a setup. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And that's kind of like you said, it's kind of something that it takes you a while to get into and to understand. And I think that's really one of the challenges of U2 in general, is like their music is deceptively simple. It seems like post-punk, like pop songs about peace and love and fighting tyrannical governments or whatever. But as I grow older and re-listen to U2 more and more, I'm struck by how everybody in that band is essential to creating a feeling on every song. And I think a lot of that is led by the Edge's guitar. You got to give credit to, of course, to Bono's vocals, but also to Larry Mullen's drumming and Adam Clayton's bass playing. Like, the drums and the bass are essential to Bullet the Blue Sky. They basically carry the song forward so that Edge can do all of this atmospheric stuff rather than having a riff. Like, this song is a great band firing on all cylinders, and I think that's why I enjoy it so much.
I think that's a good point you just made, that if everyone else is kind of keeping steady and kind of keeping everything kind of together, that does kind of allow him to kind of pop off and to kind of do whatever he wants. And I do feel like this is kind of like the less sort of, not, I don't want to say memorable is not the word, but it's not like they wouldn't put this out as a single. Like, this isn't like a single-ish song. This is like a song that you listen to. It's a deep cut. It's literally probably the definition of like a deep cut, where it's like, you're gonna appreciate this if you really appreciate like what this band is doing. So I feel like maybe it's a little hard because the song is very much the Edge put on a pedestal, and to say, here, buddy, we're gonna sing about this, and you're gonna play whatever you want.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
I just put the rig rundown for U2's The Edge. by Premier Guitar, and it's long. It's an hour long, but if you're at all interested in the Edge, if you're at all interested in like his methodology for playing, it's completely worth it because it'll just blow your mind how like scientific and meticulous and innovative and experimental that he is. It's kind of as exciting that he can sound like he does on the record when he changes so much all the time, but is so almost superstitious about other things. It's just awesome. Definitely worth checking it out. Now it's time for notable B-sides, and these were guitar solos that were so close to getting in, but they just didn't make it this week. Anybody got some notable guitar solos?
Okay, listen.
Oh no. Oh, here it comes.
Here's the thing. I couldn't pick it. I couldn't do it because I feel like it would be against my better wishes for the podcast. I really wanted to pick While My Guitar Gently Weeps, but I couldn't, in good conscience, make my first Beatles pick of the podcast a pick for a song where Eric Clapton plays the guitar solo. Like, it's the only Beatles song where they let somebody else play the guitar solo, and I was like, I can't do that. Like, that's not okay. So my honorable mention is While My Guitar Gently Weeps, because that Clapton solo is amazing. And then I also had a Beatles honorable mention with The End, which is the only song to feature a guitar solo from each Beatle. They each get 3 2-bar solos. But I was like, that's not really, like, it's not really a solo so much as it is like a bunch of mini solos. So I feel like on a technicality, that's out.
My favorite part is when they throw Ringo the guitar from back on the drum set and he plays and also drums at the same time. It was really great.
He doesn't do that, but it is his only recorded drum solo. Fun fact, Ringo Starr hates playing drum solos.
No, but you know why he hates playing drum solos? It basically has everything to do with how drums were recorded at the time. Like, I feel like a lot of people throw shade at Ringo Starr as he's not this, like, brilliant drummer like Keith Moon or somebody who was just, like, or John Bonham, who was just blowing the drums away every single time that he sat at it, but sat down behind a kit. But he recorded tracks over and over and over the exact same way every single time. That is so difficult to do. That's just being solid. That's not even being, like, oh, crazy and artistic or whatever. That's just doing your craft, right?
Being good at your job.
Like, you're keeping time and adding something a little bit more to it. Like, that's what it's about. Sorry, Neil Peart.
Don't hate on Ringo. And then all my other B-sides, I'm just going to throw them out real quick. Black Dog by Led Zeppelin, Catch Hell Blues by the White Stripes, Consolers of the Lonely by the Raconteurs, and also Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin, and Time by Pink Floyd.
Ooh.
Oh, and Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd as well. But I couldn't pick a 7.5 minute long song or Sean would kill me.
So there is a guitar solo in Beat It, but I was like, I am not picking Michael Jackson's Beat It as the song for guitar solo.
I mean, it is an Eddie Van Halen guitar solo, if that counts.
Is it really?
It is.
I didn't have time to look it up. Well, that's okay. But, I just didn't feel like that would be appropriate. It feels like bad form. I feel like we have a lot of sacred cows. I feel like instead of Friendly Fire, we should just pick a Beatles song.
Have a sacred cow episode.
Yeah, we just pick our favorite song we're never going to pick. And then I had Welcome Home by Coheed and Cambria. Jumper by Third Eye Blind. Stupid song. And Cersei by Ghost.
I don't really have songs as much as I do guitar players, and this is, man, at the risk of like coming back on my word twice since we've done Billy Joe Armstrong's Middle School Notebook, I actually think Angus Young is a surprisingly good solo guitar player. And the reason that I think that is because he plays solos that fit within the song. His solos aren't.
And there's definitely an art to that.
Right, and it's never something that's like over the top or something that doesn't mesh with the rest of the band. That's what makes him a really palatable solo guitar player, is that he knows how to read the band and he knows how to read the audience. And sometimes that's what being a guitar soloist versus a guitar virtuoso is all about, is knowing your role. Because virtuosos kind of get carried away sometimes where it's just, driving showmanship with nothing else behind it. Your band doesn't like you and this... But that's different. I also thought I really like all of the Eagles guitar playing, I just want to pick out Hotel California because it's probably like it's a classic guitar solo. Jimi Hendrix, of course, he's an innovator, so you can't really like, God, he's Jimi Hendrix. Come on, it's Jimi Hendrix. I couldn't really think of like any modern players, but that's not because there's not any out there. There are a ton. I just think of like classic rock. If you're new to guitar and you're learning like the canon of rock and roll and you want to start learning some solos, I think that going to classic rock is a good way to go because you can learn the scales and learn all the different techniques. And by the time that you get up to modern day, you have a great understanding of what's actually going on, understanding of the fretboard. And that's probably more important. And I think you need to have fun. And sometimes when you try and play virtuoso stuff, it's not fun. And, you know, when you play Rage Against the Machine, that's just fun. That's just fun stuff. It's all the way up, all the way on. That's what you need sometimes. Not this, like, running up the fretboard, crazy Dream Theater stuff. If you can play that, that's awesome. Get it done. But, I don't know. Sometimes you gotta know. You gotta know what an actually good one sounds like.
Well, Tyler, if people want to rage against some machines with you, where can they do that?
Hey everybody, you can find my design and illustration work at rudepets.club, and of course you can always find me on the socials as Rudepets Club on Instagram, Twitter, and Jiffy.
Sean, if people want to know the technicalities behind their favorite solos, where can they contact you?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram at TellySean.
And if you are just getting into U2 and want to learn where to start, you can tweet at me at TC Olmstead. And if you want to hear more of the songs that we talked about in this episode or any episode, the official No Repeat podcast playlist is available on both Apple Music and Spotify, so go check that out. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with 3 more songs on another episode of No Repeat.